gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
And welcome to this episode of the Hagman and Hagman Report. We're coming to you live from our radio and television studios located here in beautiful Northwest Pennsylvania, where we broadcast live every weeknight from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Global Star Radio Network. Folks, we're also simulcast on Blog Talk Radio, and you can watch us live, well, usually on our official YouTube channel. Unfortunately, right now, due to a number of factors, and I suppose the guest and topic might be a factor. At least I believe it to be. You could watch us live usually on our YouTube channel, but not tonight, folks. We're dark on YouTube, but going strong all across the United States and worldwide on the Global Star Radio Network, as well as simulcast on BTR, Blog Talk Radio. Don't forget, folks, we've got two separate websites, HagmanandHagman.com for show information and HagmanReport.com for information and analysis. And I'm Doug Hagman at the helm with fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagman. Together we are the Hagman and Hagman Report, what I like to call America's premier father-son investigative reporting team. We're going to get right to the show tonight. We've got just a fantastic program planned for you tonight. Want to mention, however, portions of tonight's broadcast brought to you by Nuts.com. That's Nuts.com. Are we nuts? We must be if we're doing this. Yeah, Nuts.com. What a great website, folks. Visit Nuts.com. There you're going to find an incredible array of snacks, nuts, and whatever might tickle your taste buds. Just use our program code, HH in the microphone box. That's Nuts.com, HH in the microphone box. Also, WholeTonesLive.com. WholeTonesLive.com. What a great website for music, the King David music, just to calm your stresses as we have them here in our office, the stresses, but they're offset by WholeTonesLive.com. Joe, it's got a great show tonight, hours 1 and 2. Steve Quayle from SteveQuayle.com, and also a very special guest tonight as well. Not that Steve's not special, he certainly is, but indeed, a gentleman behind the movie Amerigeddon. Next stop. If you haven't seen it before, or if you haven't seen the trailer for it, it's linked off of HagmanandHagman.com and SteveQuayle.com.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic show tonight. And this Amerigeddon movie trailer can be found if you on the Facebook site. If you just go search Amerigeddon, 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 you can find the trailer and watch that. And if I remember correctly, I believe you said the trailer has over 300,000 views already. Lots of interest in this film.
Absolutely. And Steve Quayle is our guest. He's going to be interviewing Mr. Gary Haven. Steve, we're going to turn it right over to you, sir.
Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's really important that just to put everything into perspective, I told Gary Haven, who is a producer and the first gentleman you see addressing Congress in the movie Amerigeddon, but I think, Doug, why don't you read a little of his bio? Because I think it's important for people to understand that this is not just an ordinary man that God has raised up. This is an extraordinary man, and I say that with full honor to the living God. But, you know, God places strategic people in strategic places for the absolute time that, in essence, we're all created when we give our hearts to the Lord for those purposes He's provided for us. So go ahead and read his bio, if you would, because I'll do the interview, but I want people to hear who it is we're, interviewing. And when you're talking about Gary Haven, you're talking about a man that has pretty amazing communication skills, but more than that, leadership skills. And my prayer tonight is that people will get an understanding for the heart of the man behind this movie, because as I told Gary, I said, Gary, you're surfing the headlines on a daily basis. And the movie will be released, I believe, in early April, and that's still up in the air. But anyway, Doug, go ahead and read his bio.
As much as I'd like to, Steve, I don't want to get it wrong. Our computers just went out across the board here. Okay, I have got.
Are you kidding me?
No,
Gary, welcome to computer purgatory, I guess you'd call it.
So, we're just hanging by a thread. So if Gary can introduce himself, we'd be much obliged.
Go ahead, Gary. Give a little background.
Okay. Steve, it's what a gracious intro you've already began. I appreciate those kind words, and I'll tell the audience a little bit about myself. I'm a former CEO, and I was the founder of Curves, the women's fitness franchise. My wife and I founded it 23 years ago, and it became not only the fastest growing of any franchise company in history, in the largest fitness franchise in the world, with locations in over 90 countries, but the 10th largest of all franchise companies in the world. And we attribute the success curves to a couple of things. One is honoring God in all we do. And the Bible says that if you honor Him, He'll honor you, and He was faithful to do just that. We also went to work each day with a set of values, Judeo-Christian values. Those old-fashioned values, and they're simple. Tell the truth, do what you say. He who would be greatest would be the servant of others. And we proved that those Judeo-Christian values were a fabulous foundation to build a business on. And over this last 25 years, having the opportunity to reach out and influence the quality of life of millions of women, it gave me a platform to lift up the unborn, and to lift up women in cultures in the Middle East and Japan and other places where they tend to be considered second-class citizens. And so I've just had a great privilege of being able to serve. And, there's an old baseball metaphor, if you serve, they will come. And I tell you, I want to encourage people to do that in their daily walk, to get up and do something, be available. And I'm at a point in my life now where I've sold my company. I've been retired for 3 years, and I have, quite frankly, a great deal of wealth and a platform to continue to serve. And my goal right now is to do a couple of things. One is I'm a pilot, and I fly food and medical supplies into Haiti and Central America, and we feed tens of thousands of children a day. That's a great privilege. And also had an opportunity to influence the culture. Our country's in a very desperate situation, and I realized that if you could entertain people, that they might listen. In other words, if you made a great movie that was fun to watch, but it had a message that was deadly serious, that people would come and they would hear the message, and then we could make a difference in our country. And of course, the movie that we're going to talk about tonight is Amerigeddon, and it's about an electromagnetic pulse that is perpetrated on America, and it's about the government and its unwillingness, even maybe enabling this to happen, to bring down our society. So thanks for the opportunity to let me introduce myself, Steve.
Well, I think, too, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that important to understand is that Gary has a heart for women and for the unborn. And while women's rights movement people claim to represent the women, Gary can tell you from around the world as he ministers and feeds them literally and provides seminars, health issues for them, medical issues, or not medical services, forgive me, that they see a different America than what's portrayed on the television screen, because Gary's out there where they live, and as a pilot, and he's got some amazing ratings and does a lot of flying, I think is critical. Now, Gary, what's interesting is I went and looked up Red Dawn in 1984. That was produced. That was about the Russian invasion of the United States. Patrick Swayze was in it, Jennifer Grey. And I remember watching that and believing then that that would be the future of America at some point. Then in 2012, there was a remake of Red Dawn, and if you remember, the North Koreans threw a fit because they were North Korean troops that had invaded the U.S. soil, but originally it was Chinese, and it was the Chinese, forgive me, that threw the fit. When I first watched your trailer, I thought, this is my exact first thoughts, and I think most people that watch it tonight, and I'm encouraging everybody to watch it, it's like God gave you a view of the headlines, and in essence, the entire plot of American shows, does it not? We're sold out from within.
Yes, and you know, that's probably the biggest story that we all should be talking about. And of course, Joe and Doug talk about it all the time. You know, there's a power in this country that has a purpose, and the purpose is not for the benefit of you and me and our kids and our grandkids. And depicting that power and showing it to people so that they can become aware is the most critical thing that we can be doing.
Well, and again, it's fascinating because when you were, how do I say this, deciding to make the movie, you rubbed shoulders, and ladies and gentlemen, obviously God has blessed him with a great deal of wealth. He's in the top 1% financially worldwide. But as you rub shoulders, Gary, and talk to the movers and shakers and guys that are, you know, in your league, what is the thing that is the most surprising to you? Because I think it's important that people understand, because it seems, and you and I have talked about it at length, that obviously the control of this country's financial system comes from outside the country. But do you believe that the majority of people that are in that category of billionaires, do you believe, as you've rubbed the ones you know, do they get it? Do they really get it as to the lateness of the hour?
That's an interesting question, Steve, and I'm personal friends with a number of billionaires, and you know, and every opportunity I have, I ask leading questions to try to discover where they're at, and it's interesting that most of them are simply too busy running their businesses to be involved in something as nefarious as what's really happening. And when people are vested in their status, they tend to acquire a bias to normalcy. And the more vested you are, and I'm talking about intellectuals and certainly the ultra wealthy, they don't really want to question reality too much. And I'll give you a good example. I'm friends with T. Boone Pickens, and he owns most of the water rights in the U.S. His ranch, which I've been to, sits on the Okaloosa, and I'm going to get that wrong, water fire, which goes from Texas all the way up into Kansas. And Dave Hodges often depicts T. Boone Pickens is this evil mastermind who's controlled the water for the sake of power and so forth. And having known him and talked to him and walked through over the water aquifer with him, I can tell you, he gives most of his money away. He's 83 years old now. He's a really good guy who's generous. He just happened to have an opportunity to acquire assets with great value. And I don't believe he's going to hoard that money or use it. He's at a point in his life where he's really giving everything away back to people. So I don't think most of these guys are bad guys. They're just vested in their status and their quality of life, and they don't want to be distracted or have to deal with the reality that's going on out there. You know, the really bad people are people like the George Soroses or the Henry Kissingers. These are just bad dudes. And these people actively work and pursue power. And they pursue absolute power. You know, we all hear the quote, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But there's another sentence to that quote that should be quoted. And the third sentence that you never hear is that most powerful people are bad people. And that's the rest of that quote, which I think is critical. But most of the wealthy people, they're just busy making their money, and they don't want to risk their status. It's kind of like these college professors who continue to teach this nonsense. Well, they want to keep their jobs, and they want to keep their friends. And that's more valuable to them than truth.
So in essence, and these are my words, ladies and gentlemen, so don't go saying that Gary Haven says this. I always make that differentiation so they come at me for this, but, you know, the intellectual prostitution, the friendship with the world is more important than the truth. Have you observed that pretty much? Now, I'm not talking about, you know, it's interesting because there's a difference I found between Texas, you guys that are Texas billionaires, and the European billionaires. There's a whole different, yeah, I got to tell you something. If I didn't live in Montana, I'd live in Texas. I would. I love your governor. And by the way, you know, this is on everybody's mind. We're going to go back and forth, Gary. We've got 2 hours, okay? But even as we're talking tonight, the most dangerous event has happened in Texas with Judge Scalia's murder. I looked up, I actually published it on my website, courtesy of some other guys, actually, that I published it, the laws of Texas regarding all deaths in a situation like Judge Scalia, and autopsies are part of Texas law. Do you believe Governor Abbott will demand an autopsy? Because, I mean, the stories are so conflicting, and the reason why, quote, conspiracy theories, and I don't believe in conspiracy theories, I believe in conspiracy fact. When someone initiates a hit, a murder, a takeout of a Supreme Court justice who stands contrary to the current administration, I would say there's plenty of motive there. So do you believe Governor Abbott will call for an investigation, a medical investigation, and look into it? Because I can tell you this, you know, they said something's rotten in Denmark. Well, brother, something's rotten on that ranch.
You know, at first, when I first heard it and people were talking about this gives Obama a chance to nominate someone before he leaves office, and knowing that the Republicans are in charge of the Senate and that they might have enough backbone to do their job, I just didn't. I wasn't comfortable with the idea that he was murdered. But then I got to thinking about it, and of course I read a lot about it in the last day or so. There are so many rulings that are happening now that he won't be a part of. Just getting his vote out of the way opens up the court to vote against Second Amendment rights, for example. So there's plenty of motive to have gotten rid of him, besides the opportunity to make a nomination that may or may not go through. So, you know, what we have to realize, and this is what's so hard for people like you and me and most of the American population, we can't comprehend how evil these people are and what they are willing to do. And we're at a disadvantage because of that. But the truth of the matter is, the people in power. Now, I'm going to make a strong statement here. Washington and the political power in Washington on both sides of the aisle is a criminal cabal. And these people are capable of murdering millions of Middle Eastern children for the sake of moneyed interest. So would they be willing to kill a almost 80-year-old justice that stands in their way? In a minute they would. And do they have the means? You know, and you always look at motive, means, and opportunity. Well, they've got the motive, they got the means, and I think they had the opportunity.
Well, you know, it's interesting because this comes out right now at the time, this is happening as your movie's unfolding, okay? And what's interesting, you say your byline for the movie is a true story that hasn't happened yet. Maybe you're going to have to change it to a true story that's happening now. You know, when did you begin production on this?
Well, Mike Norris, who's my co-writer, he's Chuck Norris's son. He and I began writing the script about this time last year, and we started filming in January a year ago. You know, there's so many elements in the movie that are timely. There's the Second Amendment issues. The fact that we show an EMP attack on the U.S. by North Korea. Now, how timely is that? The North Koreans launched a new satellite, KMS-4, on February the 7th. That's a week ago. And they have been testing underground, and they claim hydrogen bombs during the last few months. We've been monitoring the detonations, and our mainstream media actually makes fun of the low detonation of these underground tests, when the reality is North Korea never plans to nuke a variety of American cities. They'll never have that capability. What they want to do is do a low detonation nuclear device that will expend a greater amount of gamma rays, which is what destroys electronics. So if I were North Korea, that's exactly what I would do. And of course, we know this. There's been 2 congressional hearings that have told our people in power that this is the most imminent threat to this country. So you have all of this happening in the last few weeks. And then there's the UN deal where our Secretary of State, Kerry, has given the UN authority to come into our country with foreign troops for our safety in the event we have a disaster. And it just goes on and on and on.
Well, and I think it's important because in the trailer, and it's AmerigeddonTheMovie.com. That's your site, is it not?
That's correct.
I think it's important. I think in 90 seconds you show everyone's concern because, again, the going house to house for the guns with the strong support of the Constitution, the Second Amendment by Scalia, and you just mentioned this, I think it's critical that people understand that in the idea of public safety, what that means, bottom line, is everybody who's a bad guy has the weapons, everybody who's a good guy doesn't get to keep the weapons, and the bad guys come after the good guys. And I think that's important. So, Gary, if you were to say, you know, in your movie, you know, run through what you want the people to understand, because I thought the guy that's, you know, initiating the order to our president, showing he's basically a puppet, I once said that, you know, if everybody saw the strings attached to the White House, they'd think that, you know, that there's no thread left in the world because it all runs to Pennsylvania Avenue. So, you know, give us, if you would, a rundown on Amerigeddon, the movie, and what's the most, you know, half a dozen, or what do you want people to leave with? Because I thought the 90 seconds was so compelling. I put it up on my website
I think 3 times in one day, and I said, you've got to watch this. You've got to understand that what is going on, what's being portrayed in Amerigeddon, it's like, and these are my words, surfing the headlines. In other words, it's every new headline, and these headlines are building. And I don't even know, Gary, I know that you probably, have some idea, but when this is released in theaters, etc., I'm trying to second guess, and maybe I shouldn't do that, but what events will be in play? Well, it's playing out. In essence, you've got a movie on the screen, Amerigeddon. You're dealing with the EMP attack on the United States of America. You're dealing with the confiscation of firearms. You're dealing with the takedown of the United States from enemies within being controlled, the enemies in Washington being controlled by both the enemies within and the enemies without. And I mean, that blows my mind. Like I said, 90 seconds, you give them a reality check. So what are the other things that you're going to portray in the movie, obviously without, giving anything away, but I'm afraid the headlines will probably, basically, you and Mike are going to have to say, hey, we may need to bring this out a little sooner. Obviously, I'm chomping at the bit, and Doug, Joe, I've been talking to Gary and say, man, we got to get this thing out there. When I say we, I'm talking about those of us who are helping him in the field of the alternative radio, alternative media, and so go ahead and take your time and deal with that issue.
Well, first of all, the purpose of making the movie, and I want to restate that, to try to get people's attention is really tough. And I realize that people enjoy being entertained. And so if you can make a movie that's entertaining, but it's also fact-based, and I was committed to everything being as accurate as we possibly could make it. And it's kind of almost eerie right now with all of these things going on, just as the movie's coming out. But I wanted people that have a passion for truth, and also a duty to warn people of what's coming. And we all know the names were called and the ridicule we get for doing it. This is a vehicle for all of us to come together, the Hagmans and you, and Alex Jones had a neat role in the movie. He played the evil senator, and he was particularly evil. He did a fantastic job. And so we created this entertaining movie as fact-based as possible so that we could get the message out and people would come and watch. We could bring our friends. We could bring our family members that that really don't like to listen to this when we try to talk to them about it. And so hopefully this is going to be a tool for all of us to use to wake people up in this country, to wake as many people up as we can while we still have time. And I think the story begins with recognizing that we have lost our country. Our country is controlled by a shadow government. It's controlled by an elite that have in their sights a one world government, and they've been working on it for many, many years. And they have accomplished so much of it, and the timing now to finish what they've begun is imminent. And I want, first of all, people to realize that, for example, the president is just a puppet. He was brought into office through the interest of these people in power, and he makes his decisions and policies, and what we do in the Middle East or the Ukraine or at the border are all part of what he's told to do. And if you want some evidence of this, this last year, Princeton and Northwestern published a study, and it's real easy to find online. And they looked at policies, federal policies from 1981 to 2002. And they wanted to determine who influenced federal policy. Was it the voters of America? Were policies instituted in their interest? Or was it in the interest of those people that have money and influence? And their conclusion in their study is that the average American voter has zero influence on federal policy. And in fact, the moneyed interest in this country are the ones that make the decisions. Jimmy Carter, who was somebody that I would never agree with, came out, I think it was in December, just a few months ago, and said, America is no longer a democracy, it's an oligarchy. And that's Jimmy Carter, the man who had a staff of trilateralists on his program. And so there's really, and I think most Americans realize that that we no longer have a country that is a constitutional republic. It is it's a criminal organization now. And so, when you realize that, and you've got to begin there, if these people don't have our interests at heart and have only their own power and acquisition of wealth at heart, what would they be willing to do to diminish us? Now, Henry Kissinger said a few years ago that the only thing standing in the way of a new world order is a strong America. And he fully intends, along with a lot of other people like George Soros, to diminish the U.S. so that they can build a world power. And there's a principle called the Hegelian dialectic. It's also known as the Cloward and Piven strategy, named after a couple of Princeton professors. And that's to create chaos. And if you're in power and you create chaos, it's an opportunity to acquire more power in your attempt to solve that chaos. So they deliberately create chaos. And opening the borders to unvetted Syrians is using your common sense, who in the world would do that? There's no reason to do that. You can put this thing on hold until the FBI can figure out how to vet them. And what a novel idea. Hey, let's not go to Syria and destroy their homes and their livelihoods in the first place. They would have to flee. This is a deliberate effort to create chaos in our country so that they can assume more power as a result of it. And so if that's their strategy, then, again, what are they willing to do? Well, I believe they're willing to let North Korea detonate an EMP bomb over our country. Talk about diminishing our country so that they can bring in their new world order. And so the movie begins with my character going before a Senate hearing, challenging them to do something to protect our country from its most imminent threat. And there were two congressional hearings, I believe there were 2006 and 2008, where we had EMP commissions. And people like Dr. Peter Pry, who's an expert on this, testified that this is a real threat, and we need to do something about it. And our government initially had a law that they were going to pursue to harden our grid. And what that means is take the electronics around our country, particularly the power transformer boxes on all of our utilities across the country, and harden them. The cost was about $2 billion to harden the grid so that our electrical grid system wouldn't be destroyed from an EMP. And instead of passing that law and funding it, and by the way, we gave Pakistan $2 billion last year. So this isn't a lot of money to protect our country. And to jump ahead a little bit, if that satellite North Korea has coming over the United States 3 times a day at 300 miles above our surface, which is the optimum altitude for an EMP device, if that goes off, you'd have the electrical grid in the entire country destroyed, and it will be destroyed. Some of these transformers take 3 years to replace. And by the way, they're only made in China now. And this entire country would be without electricity. That means that most water systems would cease to function. You have no water in your homes. The internet would go down. The banks would close. There would be no banking systems. There would be no on-time delivery of groceries. There would be no delivery of fuel. We would be back to the 1800s. And the EMP Commission determined that within 12 months, 90% of Americans would be dead. So I'm arguing that they do something, and they're arguing back that I'm a nut. And then, of course, the EMP happens. And one of the side benefits of the movie is the prepping that I do. And I'm an old Boy Scout, so, having food and water and protection in your home is kind of a no-brainer to me under any circumstances. But with a government that is committed to bringing down our country, it's absolutely foolish not to take some kind of preparation. The average American is 9 meals away from starvation. People don't have provisions in their home. And so I show how to prep for this and what the preps mean after it happens. Another interesting thing that I show is that the star in the movie is a young lieutenant. And he's my kind of my protege in the movie. And he's fully aware of the threat to his country. And serving in the Army as an officer, he is faced with a decision where he's ordered to fire on American citizens when he's told to take away their weapons. And I want 1 million soldiers to watch this movie so that they can see this decision and how he goes about making it. And we actually have him say in the movie that he is not required as an American soldier to obey an unconstitutional order. And this is important that soldiers all over America see this movie so that they can think about this before they're asked to do it one day. So the themes, as you notice, are based on a lot of facts. I'll give you another one. The National Defense Authorization Act. And I'm sure our audience is familiar with that, but our Congress each year renews this thing. And I'll tell you a funny story. I grabbed my congressman last year, and I said, did you read the National Defense Authorization Act that you voted on? And he said, well, no, not really. And I said, you do realize that you passed a law that says that the president can declare an emergency for any reason where he can arrest anyone suspected of terrorism or terrorism ties, have them arrested, held without charges, without legal defense, indefinitely, and you have just removed the Fourth and Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Do you realize as a Republican that you did that? And his answer, and it and it's in the movie, by the way. I actually quoted him in the movie. His answer was, it was just a funding bill. And the other executive order that's so horrible is Executive Order 16. Lost my number on it. I'll think of it in a second. Where the president, again, can declare an emergency for any reason, and 13603. And he can take possession of all food, all provision. I'm standing here on my ranch. He can come and get my tractor. He can come and get me and draft me into a workforce without pay, by the way. It's specified in there. That executive order stands today. And not one Republican that I know of has stood up and said, hell no, you're not going to create a dictatorship at your choosing. So we quote these things, we quote Kissinger, we bring all this evidence we possibly can and weave it into the story.
Well, I think, too, that it's important for people to understand that this is unfolding in real time, and as it unfolds in real time, obviously, Gary, it's going to become more, how should I say this, sinister in the ramifications. For instance, and I apologize for someone trying to beep in. I don't know how to shut it off on this phone system. The point is that we're now living your screenplay. And very soon, and I pray, this is my prayer, and you know I prayed for this, that people will have their eyes open. And when I say entertaining, it's like unless it's in a movie, I understand why God had you do this, by the way, the very medium that would bewitch, betray, and ultimately destroy people, God, when he puts his fingerprints on it, obviously can use the very thing that the devil meant for destruction to, as you want more than anything, and as your efforts around the world to feed the starving, to feed the women, to do what you do, to basically get people's not only eyes open but hearts open. You know, as you said, and as you have declared that one of your heart's desires is that the servicemen would see this and understand. For so many years, you know, those of us on talk radio, alternative radio, have been warning about the training going on in the United States by all these foreign governments. By the way, the United Nations are the ones that are directing the whole immigration policy. And I don't call them immigrants, the illegals, I call invasionists, okay? And you made a powerful statement. They wouldn't be coming here if we weren't blowing them up over there. And so now you've got the intense, if you will, revelations of just how corrupt this country has become. And, you know, the point is that in your, if you will, prayerful consideration, what do you hope at the end of the movie people understand? Because you say you lay it out, and I've only seen, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make clear, I've only seen the 90-second trailer, and yet I get where he's going, and Gary's, you know, giving me some tidbits. I wish I could have twisted his arm. I guess I didn't twist your arm hard enough. I would have loved to have seen the whole movie, but, you know, everybody doesn't want me around when they're watching movies because I'm one of those guys that says, and you ought to see the end, it's really cool. But the point is that I think the idea is that at this point that people have got to prepare, and I didn't see this. So in the movie, you contrast the people that prepared versus the ones that didn't?
Yes, that's correct. And believe me, the number of people that prepare is, I am sickened by it. You know, it's maybe 3% of the population right now. If we could get that to 10%, then we could save millions of people.
Do you believe, by the people you run into, and let's say Mike Norris too, because obviously you guys work together, but you have your spheres of influence apart from each other, I mean, would you guess, and just throw a number out there, because I'd ask myself it, but I want to ask you it, how many people that you rub shoulders with really get it, and by my definition of getting it is understand what's going on and getting ready to happen, and are preparing and doing whatever they can to prepare and plan for their family's safety? You
know, I have a counseling degree, so I've studied the psychology of all of this over the years. So let me give you a little broader answer to that, and then I'll be specific. We operate with what's called a normalcy bias, and more and more people are learning what that means. But it's a psychological state that actually works as a defense mechanism. And the way it works is that when you're faced with evidence that threatens your existence, your status, we automatically deny it, and the more vested we are, I was talking about the billionaires or the intellectuals or the college professors, the more vested we are, and the greater threat that evidence is to it, the more creative we get in denying that evidence. And probably a good example right now is bringing in the unvetted, what was your word, refugees?
I call them invasionists.
Invasionists. Well, what percent of them are? We know the FBI says that up to 10% of them may be. So, why do we let them into our country when we can't vet them? And I'm all for immigration. We all are products of it, most of us. But to the common sense of saying, let's make sure that we're bringing in people that are coming for the right motive. You don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat or whatever to come to that logical conclusion. So how is it that so many people can come to the conclusion that, hey, this is a pretty good idea, let's bring them in here whether we can vet them or not, knowing that some percentage of them are radicalized and are coming to cause harm here? How do you make a decision that that's a pretty good idea? And Europe is a good example right now. Where does Merkel come up with it's a pretty good idea to bring all these, a million unvetted immigrants into our country? And the answer to that is one of several things. It can be a normalcy bias because we want to be good people. We want to open our arms to these people that are struggling and so forth. And I get all that, but a normalcy bias kind of blinds us to the evidence that we can't necessarily have an open border without some vigilance involved with it. And by the way, it kind of brings me up to another angle that I like to talk about. There are 3 or 4 reasons people tend to do stupid things. One of them is they're just apathetic. They just don't care. And you got a lot of people in our country right now that to defend them a little bit, it's a struggle to get to work and to take care of your kids and to pay your taxes and they just don't have time to care about these serious issues. Then you've got the ignorant, those that just don't know and are not motivated to learn about it. So between the ignorant and the apathetic, these people in power are able to accomplish extraordinary things at our expense. But then you've got people like Merkel, who just is plain evil. And these people in power in Washington that are continually voting against the interest of their constituents and then coming back and lying about it. It's just evil. And so people like us, you and me, the Hagmans, we have an obligation, in fact, a better word is a compulsion for truth. Now, we serve the author of truth. And, talking about this puts me at risk. Steve, you're on every red and blue and green list in the world. Yeah, me talking
I tell people I'm on the list in the ultraviolet realm.
But you know what? It doesn't matter because first of all, we have a duty to a God that loves us, who requires us to be obedient. So there's no getting out of that. But there's this compulsion for truth. We have to tell the truth no matter where it leads us. And so, it's our job to warn people. It's our job to speak truth to power. And it really doesn't matter the consequences for that. So anyway, having said all that, I think people talk about 3% of the population are prepping for difficult times, and I think that's probably about right. Let me throw another idea out there, and that's the financial Amerigeddon that's going to be coming. Even if you have trouble getting your hands around, North Korea and an EMP and our government would actually, the people in power that would actually enable that to happen so they could acquire more power. Those things are difficult. Here's one that's not really difficult. We just passed $19 trillion in federal debt the other day. Now that didn't include the 100 to 200, and I'm being conservative, trillion in unfunded liabilities that are there. And if you just take 100 trillion and there's 100 million American families, the average American family owes $1 million. And what's the likelihood that's going to be paid back? What's the likelihood we could even service that debt, even if there was no interest on it? We are in a financial Amerigeddon right now as a result of the policies of our federal government and the criminal cabal that exists there. And, of course, they can't get away with it except that they own the media. And 98% of the mainstream media is owned by 6 corporations. And on the boards of those corporations sit the same people, as well as the corporatists that buy the advertising, influence the policy. We have a media in this country that, instead of being a watchdog, is a lapdog. And thank God for what you're doing, Steve, and the Hagmans and the alternative media. It's the only source of truth. And, you've got to discern everything you look at. But if we didn't have the Internet and we didn't have alternative media, it would be hopeless. As it stands now, it's hard to say it's hopeful. But God has, as He said, and I believe it's 2 Thessalonians 2:20, He said that because we rejected righteousness, that He would give us great deception. And our country is bought into the deception that killing unborn babies, and I don't know if you saw what New York did today.
Yes, I did. I put it up on my website.
They're moving towards abortion to the day of delivery. And I tell you, I'm so proud to live in Texas. Texas, this last year, passed the 20-week law, so that you can't abort a baby after 20 weeks. They also required abortion facilities to have certain care levels, and that caused most of the abortuaries in this state to close. I was so privileged to be on the podium when we swore in our governor, Greg Abbott, and the lieutenant governor. I was up there with about 50, 75 people. And both of these men at the podium, they've already won the election, so they aren't saying this to get votes. But both of them, and I'll paraphrase it, the lieutenant governor said, I have respect for all religions, but I'm a Christian first, and we will pass no laws in this state that are not consistent with the Judeo-Christian values. So I live in a state that is the complete opposite of New York. We value our Judeo-Christian traditions and values and are acting on it. And as a result, I believe Texas may be preserved as a sanctuary. I'm friends with the governor. And
hey, Gary, you got to hold a minute now. Just hold that thought because we got to take a break.
Good deal.
Right on, Steve. Thank you. Folks, you're listening to this Tuesday edition of the Hagman and Hagman Report. We are joined by Steve Quayle.
And Mr. Gary Haven. Amerigeddon. Go ahead.
Yeah, Amerigeddon is the name of the movie that is being finished by Gary. You can find the trailer on Facebook, Amerigeddon. We're going to come back with these two right on the other side. Stay with us.
This is the Global Star Radio Network.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the Hagman and Hagman Report. Doug Hagman, Joe Hagman, together we are the Hagman Hagman Report investigators in search of the truth. Our very special guest tonight, Mr. Steve Quayle, stevequayle.com, author extraordinaire, researcher. stevequayle.com is his website. And actor, filmmaker, all-around great guy, Mr. Gary Haven. What a resume, impressive resume he's got. He is behind the film Amerigeddon. Folks, if you haven't seen the trailer, you just go to hagman.com. A link to the trailer and the Facebook page for the video is right there. I just can't wait for everyone to see this. What a fantastic initiative, and educational, informational. And a little bit disconcerting as well with respect to the message. Before we get back to the program, I want to remind everyone that portions of tonight's broadcast brought to you by Nuts.com. Nuts.com. What a great website. Nuts.com have, in our opinion, the best tasting snacks, nuts, anything you'd like to have to munch on the planet. Now, if you get hungry during the day like we do, we rarely have time for lunch. Nuts.com is a great snacking alternative. Have you been to the store and seen their selection of nuts and snacks lately? No selection at all, sitting in cans, jars, on the shelves for months. Let's be honest about this. You're not going to find sprouted almonds, dried goji berries, or delicious black walnuts at your local grocery store, at least not something that's edible. No, this is where Nuts.com comes in. Folks, right now, new customers to the Hagman and Hagman Report, compliments of Nuts.com, can get 4 free samples to choose from. They've got over 50 options for those samples. That's a $15 value. Go to Nuts.com, click on the mic, enter our code HH, the family-owned business since 1929.
And I'll tell you, anybody who wants to send their cashews or pistachios this way, I would not be disappointed.
That's right. Just wrap them up in a $50 bill. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is fantastic stuff. Our favorites are dried fruits, and the figs are just phenomenal, strawberries. And I spoke with the CEO, the head nut, shall we say, at Nuts.com. What a fantastic guy. Actually, he was in the middle of quality control checks on his products. That's how hands-on this man is. Folks, Nuts.com. Right now, new customers, 4 free samples. Don't miss out. You got over 50 options. They've got over 3,000 healthy snacks to choose from. For example, 39 different kinds of coffee, 170 flavors. But go to Nuts.com right now. Get your 4 free samples at a $15 value. You've got to go to Nuts.com. Enter our code HH. That's Nuts.com, HH, for 4 free samples with your order. Go there for full details. That's Nuts.com. Getting back to the program, Joe.
Yeah, again, tonight with us, Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com and Gary Haven, the creator of Amerigeddon, a film to be released in mid-May. The release date was moved back a little bit as they're putting the final touches on, and this is going to be a great movie out in theaters. So you're going to want to keep your eye out and check out the trailer. Do a search for Armageddon.
No, it's linked right off of, right off of Hagman.com. Just click on the article or Hagman Report and Hagman. You can go there. Yeah, I didn't mean to overtalk you, but the link is, we made it real easy for you. Mr. Haven, if you can answer one thing, we're getting flooded by emails asking when the DVD if there will be a DVD made, and if so, when it might be available. Can you address that before we get back to
yeah, sure. There'll be a theatrical release mid-May, early to mid-May, in the southern U.S., and that will run its course, and 6 months after that, the DVD will be released.
Gotcha. All right. Steve, we're going to turn it back over to you, sir.
Well, Gary, we got interrupted by the break. Will you talk about Governor Abbott? Because I don't know him as you do, but he stands out as a stalwart individual. And I did say on the radio prior to you and I coming on this interview multiple times, seriously, because of your leadership, that's probably the place I would live if I didn't live in Montana. And then I told Gary, Doug, most people don't know this, if it wasn't for Texans, Nelson Story, bringing up the cattle herds to feed the miners, there would be no Montana, and there wouldn't have been a gold rush because they probably couldn't have existed just on wild game. So Texas and Montana have an affinity. So Gary, share about Governor Abbott, because I'm kind of taken back in a good way by him, because he loves his country, but he's not letting the vipers and brood of hellspawn get away with what they want to do to Texas, and he's really aware of the federal hatred and plot against Texas. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, it is. He is and he was our Attorney General for several terms. He sued the federal government 32 times.
God bless him.
That's a record. Every time they tried to overreach, he would slap their hand. In fact, he won the only Ten Commandment display to go before the Supreme Court, the right to display the Ten Commandments at the University of Texas. So he is a bold and gracious man. I had mentioned I was on the podium, and when he committed to pass no laws that were not consistent with our Judeo-Christian values, since then, he had Jade Helm monitored by the Texas National Guard. I've been uniquely privileged to know him on a more intimate level, and when he won, actually just before the election for governor, before he won, I told him, I said, "You're going to be the most important governor in Texas history." And he looked kind of perplexed, and I said, "You're going to be in a position to make a decision to stop the overreach of a criminal federal government." And for somebody who had already sued him 32 times, it was I don't know how profound a statement it was, but he understands his responsibility to the citizens of the state, and just as importantly, he understands his responsibilities to the Constitution. And this man is bold, and he is not afraid of ridicule, and I believe he is not going to be bought and paid for like so many of the politicians across our country. And so we're really blessed to have him there. And on a spiritual level, I felt for a long time now that God may give like-minded people a sanctuary. The place in the wilderness for the woman, it could very well be Texas. And we certainly have a leadership in this state that would stand against a out-of-control government, federal government. And so I feel really privileged to be here, and hopefully, this will be a sanctuary for people to come to if the rest of our country it goes down for whether it's a financial debacle, which is imminent, in my opinion, or as the movie depicts, an EMP attack on this country, which I also think is a very real possibility.
Do you get asked the question much? Because obviously you're on the speaking tour now, and Doug and Joe, thank you for allowing Gary to come on, because again, Amerigeddon, I think is honestly, I believe it is, if people could go with my metaphor, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but when I say surfing, you always look for the biggest wave. And I was raised in Southern California around the surf culture. That dates me. But the bottom line is that we're at the point now where every headline, every event, every incident is all pointing to the end of the age, not the end of the world. Big difference. And so, Gary, other places to live. After we do shows like this, my emails fill up and they say, ask Gary where he would go. And obviously not everyone has, your wherewithal. But what are some of the countries you investigated that you like, at least the government at this point?
Well, I was privileged in my business to travel to many, many countries. My company has locations in 90 countries. So having been to most of them and piloting my jet to most of them, I had an opportunity to sit down with people, conduct business with people, and acquire familiarity with the cultures and the legal systems, the rule of law, in so many of them. I have property and other countries and residences that I can go to, and I am privileged that way. The problem with that is several things. One is, can you get out in time? Because when it happens, it's going to happen fast. And can you get your family and friends out? And I've got a lot of family and friends, so that's going to be a difficult thing. And most importantly, I have an obligation to my God to do what He tells me to do, and He intends for me to fight, to fight for the freedom and for the rule of law that we used to have in this country. And I could right now pack up everybody and move. I'm basically retired and go settle in a place that is less threatened by this. But I choose to stay and fight. And so what places are less threatened? Societies collapse over history, not because of a invading army. They collapse because of complexity. The more complex a society becomes, the more energy required to sustain that society. A good example is Rome or Egypt. Their societies became so complex that it was just enormously expensive to maintain them. And America is a good example. We are so complex right now. Our internet gets attacked through cyber attacks thousands of times a day. If somebody's successful in bringing down the internet for any length of time, our society is in great peril. And there's an example of the vulnerability that you've got in a complex society. So what I look for is a country that's less complex. And some of the countries that fit that bill are Australia and New Zealand, Costa Rica, some of the South American countries, maybe even Canada to a point. The next thing I look for are a Judeo belief system, a value system. You really can't have. George Washington said that a democracy wouldn't work if you didn't have a Christian people, because you would otherwise have to have a police force that was so large that you couldn't manage it. So you've got to have people like us who believe in truth and honesty and fairness and in giving back, and so that value system is critical as well. And again, places like Australia and New Zealand have a Judeo-Christian value system. Particularly like Australia, because even though they've taken the guns away from people and they've done a few other things that are not in the best interest of the citizens, it's a small enough country. It's the same population as Texas, even though they're spread out in a country the size of the U.S. It's a small enough society that when they get upset about something, that their legislatures listen to them. And I'll give you an example. The previous administration bought into the global warming hoax and began to pass laws and do things that were harming the economy and the people. And they elected someone to replace that administration who completely reversed everything immediately. And so even though Australia is not quite, and I know we have some listeners from Australia, and I think they would agree with this, even though they're not as freedom-minded as they should be, because they are an individualist society, much like Texas, by the way. They get it. They get it quick, and they can make changes because their society is not that complex and not that large. So if you've got rule of law, a Judeo-Christian value system, in a society that's less complex, I think those are the places that you should be looking for.
Well, let me ask you this, too, because this is critical to most people. And this is the question Doug gets asked. Anybody who does a show like this will get asked it. My guarantee is you'll get asked it. It'll be called the inverse question law. The more you talk about what's coming down and the sooner, what is the event or events, let's say the top three, because people want answers, and I think it's really great to be able to have the privilege to interview you, but what are the three things that Gary Haven and everything you know, everyone you have access to, what are those things that you would know this is on? In other words, what events are going to say it's on, okay? Not it's close to being on. And obviously an EMP attack. I'm saying, though, leading up to that.
Okay. First of all, everything is by design.
Agreed.
The spending of our government, the indebtedness of in private debt, the trillion in student loans, this debt is by design, and considering their goal is to bring down the United States, the entire financial debacle that we're facing is by design. Let me take a little sidestep. My master franchisee for Greece and for Cyprus was my good friend, and she 3 years ago, maybe it's 4 now, had just sold her house in Cyprus and put her 350,000 euros in her Cypriot bank account. A week later, the Cypriot banks went on bank holiday. And, of course, you remember this. Well, I was able to communicate with her through the entire process and can tell you what happened when they created the bank bail-in policy. At first, the Cypriot banks, to try to reopen, decided that they were going to take a percentage out of everybody's bank accounts that were being held down, frozen. And they were talking about 8 to 10%. Now, the masses of people didn't have a lot of money in the bank. They had their 2 or 3 or 4,000 euros of expenses in the bank. But because it involved everybody, they took to the streets in Cyprus. They threatened to burn the banks down. So the banks said, okay, we're not going to do that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the people that have 100,000 or more euros in the bank, and we're going to take the money above that, a percentage of it. And so my friend lost most of her money that she had deposited into the bank from the sale of her home. She was given, in exchange for her money, bank stock, which was worthless. And they call this a bail-in. Now, the G20, about a year and a half ago, met, and that includes the United States and Australia and European countries, and they adopted policy that said that we're no longer going to use taxpayer money to bail out the banking system like we did back in 2007 and 8. Instead, we're going to consider the money that's deposited by the depositors as unsecured an unsecured debt, a loan to the bank. And then Dodd-Frank, and you can Google bail-in USA and Dodd-Frank will pop up. Dodd-Frank has a provision where if a systemically important bank were to fail, that it can take the depositors' money and give them bank stock instead. Now, you may think that the FDIC is going to protect your bank deposit. Well, a couple of problems with that. Number one is the FDIC only has about $30 billion in the insurance fund to cover $7 trillion in deposits. Second problem with that is you don't really lose your money when you're given bank stock. So the FDIC is not necessarily liable to replace your lost funds. And third, back in December of 2014, when they passed the Omnibus bill, that was the big spending bill, Jamie Dimon from Citibank had gone to Washington and lobbied our Congress, and led by the Republicans, they included a provision in the Omnibus bill that gave banks derivative exposure priority over your and my deposit in the bank. Talk about a criminal act committed by not just the Democrats, but the Republicans. And that is on the books at this moment. Now you got to think, how could our banks ever fail, and when would they ever bail in? Well, okay. First of all, they did it in Cyprus. We watched them do it, and which was just a test, by the way. Their banks in Europe are failing right now. Deutsche Bank lost 50% of its value in the last 6 months. Our banking system in this country is tremendously exposed because of their fractional lending policies. So if they didn't intend to bail us in and confiscate our deposits, why did they adopt it? Why did they codified it into law? And so I think what's going to be the big event is that there's going to be a financial failure. And again, it's by design. Now, when countries have catastrophes like financial failures, and the people would rise up against the government, they often have a strategy they use, and it's called war. They go to war. And when you look at what we're doing in Syria and how we are literally poking the Russian bear, not to mention Ukraine, there's a good chance they're going to use war to distract the people from what the government did to them financially. So I think the series of events you're going to see this financial collapse, and immediately after that, they're going to escalate the war that's going on right now in the Middle East. And then at some point in time, I really believe that they're going to bring the U.S. down through an EMP attack. And it's going to be enabled by the people in power in our country.
Well, they'll have to steal the money before they allow the EMP, because obviously, they're going to do it. I think they're going to do it and blame it on a cyber attack. By the way, Jamie Dimon is the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, and that is the largest of the big four American banks. So, ladies and gentlemen, most people forget that when Goldman Sachs was called the giant vampire squid sucking the life out of the American consumer, the American middle class, and Jamie Dimon, what you have is these guys are controlling the, if you will, the outcome of, and I think you said it's already scripted, Gary, they're controlling the outcome. Now, can I ask you a question personally? The people that you know in banking, do they expect this, or are they in la-la land?
You know, it's kind of consistent with the answer I'd given earlier about the billionaires and the intellectuals. They're so vested in their status that they really don't want to recognize the evidence that's before them.
Gotcha.
And the really evil people is a small group at the top that really understand what's going on. And you know, you've got a hierarchy. Even the people in Washington, most of them that have sold their souls to keep their office, you know, they're just henchmen, and they're going to have the most rude awakening of all when they pay the price for their betrayal of their constituents and their country. So I think you have the denial of evidence, and that's going to kind of provide the cover for these people to continue to act in our, you know, against our interest.
Your
Stephen,
thoughts on your? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Steve, if I can just ask this question, Mr. Haven, this is something that's really kind of I've been weighing in my mind, and I've gotten a couple of emails about this, and people wondering the same thing. So perhaps you can just give me your assessment. You know, whether it be an EMP or the orchestrated takedown economically, why hasn't it happened yet? I guess that's it.
Yeah, that's a good question, and let me kind of add a side question to it. What are the imminent things that we see on the horizon? And Steve just mentioned one of them. That was a very good insight. They want to get all the money before they crash the system. And by the way, this is something that I think it helps people wake up. You know, in 2007, when they bailed the banks out, because we can't audit the Fed, we really don't know how much they gave to the banks in our tax dollars and so forth, but it was at least $7 trillion. You realize that they printed $7 trillion and gave it to the bankers who'd made bad deals. If they had taken that $7 trillion and given it to the American people, it would have paid off every home mortgage in the country. Now, I don't know about you, but that really upsets me. You know, the valuation of our money by printing $7 trillion to save the bankers. Well, why not give it to the people and pay their mortgages off? You know, would we have been a better country as a result of that? And so that just kind of puts the scope on it. But back to your question, you know, I've been talking to Steve a lot, and there's so many things going on that, you know, he's pushing me to get my movie out tomorrow because it might be too late.
Actually, tonight for a midnight showing.
And you know, and I'm watching the same thing as he's watching, and I'm thinking, you know, this Korean satellite's probably going over my head right now in the southern Texas sky, and there's just things that they want to get done that they're working feverishly to accomplish. You know, like taking away our weapons, for example. And there's a ton of stuff. I think they're trying to get as many things done as they can before they pull the trigger. And they just have a lot of things that's so close that they're trying to postpone it until it happens. But I'll tell you this, when it happens, it will be at their choosing. It will be a deliberate day where they pull the trigger because they've got as many things in place as they think they can get away with before it happens. And the American people are so asleep, and the media is so controlled. We don't have media, we have propaganda in this country. And they're doing things so blatantly right now, so out in the open, more so than a year ago or a couple of years ago, that I think they believe they've just got a free hand to finish those things that they want to have in place before they do it. And, you know, I don't know that it'll be this year because I see so many things they have in the works. And, you know, you've got factors like, Hillary will continue that she is bought and paid for by the moneyed interests. She's a criminal, committed 4 felonies with emails alone. She's a criminal family all into herself. And if it looks like she's going to get elected, they may just wait and continue to get these other things done. If they end up with somebody like Trump, then they may pull the trigger and go ahead and act because they've gained the ground that they think they can gain.
I think, too, Gary, that one of the things that's the most interesting right now that can change, they always talk of a game changer, an unintended consequence. I think that the Syrian situation is going to escalate in such a manner that Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, is going to overplay his hand. He believes that he's got NATO backing him up, and to some degree they do by their mutual defense agreements. But the fact is that all through Moscow, I was just sent by my friend Aaron, and I sent it both to you guys so you can check it after the show. But they're starting to build the case that there's giant posters, and this is what it says translated. I don't speak Russian. Smoking kills more people than Obama. It shows him obviously, 100 tokes over the line. But the point being is that he's absolutely, how should I say this? Obama has no handle on basic military tactics outside of one. And this is where I think most people don't get it, okay? They don't understand the whole Middle East takedown, especially under George Bush's lies, and, the entire giveaway of our technology from the Clinton era to the Chinese, or our top-secret patent library, etc. But what is critical is this, is that Russia understands what has to be done. And I think what's a game changer is they've given their frontline commanders, and they're moving all their heaviest weapon in there into their western front, if you will, and he's given them authority, and you can see this in news stories, to use tactical nuclear weapons against NATO and especially against Turkey. I think Turkey's going to overplay their hand. I don't know what the event will be, and let's see if it plays out. They're going to do something, and then Russia is going to move so swiftly and so decisively that the NATO command structure won't even have time to respond to. And I think that as you're watching what's happening in Europe, and by the way, Angela Merkel's an illuminist, okay? Isn't it amazing that all these people that are opening up their countries and then claiming they've got to clamp down, they're the ones you talked about, the Hegelian dialectic. You create the problem, you provide the solution, you bring about the desired change. I think, and I think everyone should be praying on this, I think the game changer is in the Middle East. Saying that, I think that in Turkey, forgive me, the time that the events seem to scale up may force a hand of all these mega bankers to basically just hit the banks with a fake, if you will, false flag cyber attack, get everybody's money, and then let the bombs fly where they may. Because again, I don't think people in the entire history of the world, we happen to have the technological ability as they have it now to rape, pillage, and plunder. And I think that we're just right there. So, can I ask you this? In your movie, and again, obviously there will be no midnight showing tonight, but the point is that we're seeing the headlines playing out. Basically, can you give a little bit more away of the movie? Look, I'm hanging on every word, so I would, and I'm sure that people are too. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, please, I'm asking you a favor. Those of you who listen to Hagmann, please watch the trailer. I want you to watch it twice, and then I want you to take it to prayer. You know, Gary, that private, and I think, Doug, this is true, that 80-90% of our audience is Christian worldwide. But as you see the headlines, I want you to remember this, that 90 seconds worth of headlines laid out in this trailer, I don't think it can be more succinct. I couldn't have made it more succinct, and I'm not saying whoopee for me, I'm just saying you nailed it. So give us a little more as this thing unfolds,
Well, there's another aspect. We do battle in the movie with the United Nations. And I mentioned earlier that Kerry signed an agreement with the United Nations that if America has an emergency, that they're invited in with their foreign troops, which it looks like we've got 150,000 Russian troops already in our country. We have Chinese in the country. We've already given the Chinese the most important port in our country, the port at Long Beach. And the United Nations actually comes to my ranch to arrest me and the young lieutenant and to confiscate our weapons and supplies. That's an important thing. You've got people in Washington who have committed to the elite that want to bring about a one world order. And Angela Merkel, being an Illuminati, which also means being a Satanist, is evidence of what these people will do when they have the opportunity to do it. And they have, through signing treaties with the UN, which is against the law because our Senate must approve them, and Kerry signed it. He's a traitor to his country. And I'm going to say something really strong here. We shouldn't be talking about impeaching Obama. We should be talking about charging him with treason. When you open up the border to unvetted people, some percentage of whom are coming in here to kill citizens, that's treason. And by the way, the definition of treason is making war against your country or aiding and abetting those that are. And Washington declared the terrorist as an enemy. And for Obama to be allowing them to come into our country, that's aiding and abetting the enemy. This is treason. And I'll say something else that people need to understand. And I'm going to tell a little story here. Back when ISIS went into Mosul and captured 2,400 armored Humvees, 50 tanks, $1 billion with a B dollars worth of American weaponry, with the keys in ignition, and drove it out of town, I thought to myself, don't we have a couple of F-18s on an aircraft carrier nearby that could come in and destroy the equipment? Because that's what you do. That's the military never lets their equipment be captured into enemy hands. When Obama didn't give the order to destroy that equipment, but instead gave $1 billion of military equipment to the enemy, I realized that this doesn't make any sense. So I began to do the research and discovered that ISIS is actually the creation of the CIA, along with the Obama administration. We trained them, we support them, and the purpose was to go into Syria and to bring down Assad. And there's a couple of reasons to bring down Assad. One is that Russia's got a port there, and America can maintain its hegemony and its power in the region. But there's a bigger reason. It's the moneyed interest. There's a pipeline that's being built through Syria that's going to compete with the pipeline of the Saudis and the Americans. And they wanted to stop the pipeline because of moneyed interest. The bankers wanted a central bank in Syria, and Assad wasn't willing to play the game. So we've been sending our weapons, and they're trying to send our kids in there to fight another war that has nothing in the American interest, only moneyed interest. And you can say the same thing about the Ukraine. We have no interest over there, but these people in Washington are beholden to the moneyed interest. And when you talk about ISIS being created and supported by Americans, by the elite, by Obama and by the CIA, and you look at what ISIS is doing and beheading Christians, raping them, and the horrors they're doing, you can set that at the feet of Obama. That's what we should be talking about. And that's the most important story out there. I was explaining this to the governor of Texas a few weeks ago because he wasn't aware of that. And I was explaining this to Rand Paul a couple of days ago on a phone call I had with him. I'm trying to wake people up that we have a criminal cabal in Washington. And you know, they create enemies, boogeymans. They create boogeymans so that they can protect us. And in protecting us, they remove our freedoms and our resources, and they send our kids to die. And so this whole thing, we need to get all of America up to speed on where ISIS came from. If we can do that, we can peel back this onion. We can wake a lot of people up.
Well, here's the issue, too, and I think this is critical. I want to go on record, and I'm obviously, you know, somebody said, boy, they love it when you say that. Anyone who is in favor of gun control will ultimately be your co-executioner. They will use paid mercenaries to carry out the sentence, and that should be offensive to everybody in this country. That should be offensive to everyone listening in, that we have taken and everything that God in His mercy, everything that people of faith who built this country, the freedoms they held so dear, we have let them take everything, and they won't stop in taking your life. You know, Gary, you have a position that God has placed you in. Basically, God has raised you up for such a time like as this, as Queen Esther, and, you know, there's a time in a season, but this is the time in the season. And, you know, how do I say this delicately? I don't believe in saying it delicately. I won't. Here's the deal. Yeah, I'm about as delicate as a herd of elephants in a crystal factory in Austria. I'm not talking crystal meth. I'm talking Swarovski crystal, just for the record. The point is that they are plotting, planning our demise. When I think I was one of the guys, and I know this, to break the story on one of the think tank, the Deagle think tank, saying that within a matter of years, I think, 2025 or 2020, there'd only be 38 million Americans left. Hello, you know, people, here's what I want to say. You look at the people in your immediate family. If you've got a family of 4, 3 of those are going to be dead. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm using that as a statistic. If you've got, 50 people working for you in your business, or 500, take 90% of that. They're going to be dead. And see, Gary, this is what I love about Texas, okay? And this is what they hate about Texas. And obviously, I have friends that are Texans, and obviously, you know, the spirit of Texas is a spirit of resistance to tyranny. Obviously, it started with the Alamo. And I can tell you, point blank, that the Congress and the Senate, I'm going to make this clear, are complicit in the coming murder. They are the co-executioners of the United States citizens, and the United States citizens better learn another legal maneuver they have. It's the power of recall and the power of impeachment. Treason's treason, but not one of those, and even Rand Paul, they don't use the T word, okay? They beat around the bush. And with the people that you talk to, I think it's in the American governor's hands, and I think it's in the sheriffs of America's counties' hands, because not all sheriffs will roll over. And you know, as I would say, and I have friends that are federal law enforcement officers, since when did we, the American public, become the enemies? And the guy that took after people and hatcheted them were known to the FBI for 4 years. You see, and why are the terrorist camps in America not even being raided by the FBI, but you get, the Three Stooges in some place in some, county out in whatever part of the country, and they don't know better, they get set up, and then all of a sudden we've got a domestic terrorism problem. This is the Cloward-Piven strategy, to overwhelm all the systems, overwhelm immigration, overwhelm welfare, overwhelm. And brother, I don't know what it's going to take outside of repentance on the order of Nineveh. And isn't it interesting that Jonah, the name storm, has already been on our vocabulary? So, Gary, I would hope that you would call the people you know, and literally, when I say call them, I don't mean meet them face to face. And I think that Doug, Joe, all of us, everybody who's on talk radio must drive home that point. We're not talking about political issues. We're talking about treason, treachery, and mass murder. Now, is that succinct enough?
Amen.
Could you be more clear, Steve?
Yeah. So, in your movie, as they come to you and you're defending your ranch, is that a spoiler to tell us? Or would you rather not? Brother, I'm going to get this whole thing out of you.
No, I'll share a couple of. By the way, let me amen what you just said there. That's how it needs to be spoken about, not meekly, like unfortunately so many people who do have a platform should be speaking. I began this conversation by saying that we're at a great disadvantage because we don't understand the evil. We just don't have the capacity to envision how evil these people are. And they derive their evil from the king of it, from Satan himself. And they're not limited in their capacity for evil. So it's just hard to wrap your mind around that. The outcome, and I know this is what people are thinking if they could ask it. So I'll throw it out there. How do you stop this? And I hate to tell you this, but I don't think we can stop what's coming. I flavor all of my intellectual approaches to these things with a biblical basis. And the Bible is quite clear that these times are coming. And that these people are going to gain power. The good news is it's for a very limited time. So my goal is to warn as many people as I can, to motivate them to be bold about thinking critically, sharing that with people, to prepare financially, provisionally, and try to save as many people from this coming catastrophe as I can, knowing that it's going to happen, and there isn't anything that's going to prevent it from happening. And hopefully Texas will be that sanctuary, and this is a godly state, and God does provide protection for people that are faithful to Him. So I'm hopeful that we can save a lot of people because of what we're doing. But is it going to happen? Yes. And our job is to warn as many as we can, not necessarily to try to prevent it from happening.
Amen. And I'm on board with you. I've never stated in all the years I've been on talk radio, 9,000 plus hours, that we could stop it, but we can We can rescue the perishing, we can be the salt of the earth, and we can believe God for those sanctuary cities, which are called the cities of refuge or states of refuge. And by the way, I could see literally such a revival, a true biblical-based revival on repentance breaking out in Texas, that I don't care what hell throws at it, it will prevail. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to see this trailer. Please send it to everybody you know. AmeriGeddonTheMovie.com, AmeriGeddon, and I love that name, by the way. I love it, of course. I love it because it puts it into the pertinency of the hour, and it's fascinating to me, too, that we're right here again, 1984, what did George Orwell say? That's when Red Dawn came out. Right now, 2016, we're waiting for you to release a movie. How's that for a gentle twisting? Of Amerigeddon the movie.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that, and I want to thank my partner in this, Mike Norris, who did a wonderful job as a director. His dad, Chuck, yesterday on Facebook came out and encouraged people to go see the trailer and to go see the movie. So Chuck's, who's a great American, is supporting the project, and he has watched the movie, by the way. He apparently saw my character and asked if I was from Hollywood. So apparently I'm pretty convincing. Even Chuck Norris bought it.
Well, and again, we think of the movies that he was in, going and searching for the veterans. And again, ladies and gentlemen, pray for the veterans, support them. I'm talking about as God leads. And, Gary, again, the thing is that as you're on, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Gary will be on for extended time tomorrow on Coast to Coast. You'll be seeing him in the weeks ahead on Skywatch TV and other television programs. So please make this viral. Those of you who have been blessed by Hagmann and Hagmann's ministry, by my ministry, my website, all the stuff I do, it's to inform you, because believe it or not, information is a weapon. Don't let them choke you with garbage, or as I prefer to call it, warm vomit or lukewarm vomit. That's what the mainstream media is. Hey, Gary, thank you so much. And, Doug, what are we? We're just about out of time.
We've got about 2-3 minutes left. And, Gary, we'd love to have you back on the show before the movie release or just after, whenever you're available, just around the release of the movie.
Yeah, love to.
Guys, Steve, thanks for all you do, and you're a good friend, and Joe, Doug, really admire what you guys are doing, speaking of the truth, and I know you know the risk involved with it. Did you have a question for me that you might want to take this last minute or two to answer?
Yeah, we had a listener question. They asked what your opinion of Donald Trump is in this upcoming presidential election.
Well, I do have an opinion on it. I personally know a lot of the players. I took Rand Paul to Haiti back in October. He and two other doctors did 200 cataract surgeries and gave the blind sight. It was an amazing trip, and I got to spend 4 days with him each evening talking politics. And so, I've been a big fan of his. His strategy to win the election, however, was awful, and he continued to do the same thing, expecting different results, which was amazing to me. So we're kind of stuck with who is not bought and paid for. And Trump is as big of a mess as he is his own mess. And I actually believe he has enough money to not be bought and enough courage to not be scared into submission on this deal. So, I don't like the idea that he wants to double down on torture and some of these other awful things. But right now it comes down to who isn't owned. And I believe he is the only one that you can say that for. Let me drop a bombshell. I know Cruz personally, had dinner with him last year and vetted him. And, we saw a few weeks ago he got caught not reporting loans from Goldman Sachs to his campaign. When I had dinner with him, I discussed the Ukraine. It was the hot thing going on at the time. And I determined that Ted Cruz is the designated opponent. He's the guy they choose to make us think we have a choice. And I believe he's bought and paid for, certainly by the banks and certainly by the military-industrial complex. So, Donald, whether you agree with everything or not, at least he will not continue the destruction of our country for the benefit of the moneyed elite.
Thank you both so much. We're at the top of the hour. God bless you. Thank you so very much, Steve and Gary Haven.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Folks, we'll be right back with Stan Deyo on the other side.
This is the Global Star Radio Network.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this segment of the Hagman and Hagman Report. Our very special guest tonight, Mr. Stan Deyo, StanDeyo.com. That's StanDeyo.com. Bookmark his website, of course. Go to his website, bookmark his website. Check out the show images page as you go along today. For those listening, I just want to mention that portions of this broadcast brought to you by Whole Tones. WholeTonesLive.com. Have you gone there yet, folks? Do so. What a great opportunity for you to enjoy one of life's greatest pleasures, music. Folks, WholeTonesLive.com is what I'm referring to. If you're sick and tired of being stressed, if you're overwhelmed, if you feel unmotivated, if you feel like life is running you instead of you running your life, well, you're not alone. We're all in the same boat. Finally, however, you can experience the scientifically proven powers of music therapy with Whole Tones. They've got a collection of proven music therapy that can help you reduce your stress, ease your mind, and motivate you. You can get started today. Listen to a free sample of this amazing music that heals and inspires. Where? Well, it's at WholeTonesLive.com. That is with a W, W-H-O-L-E, as in a whole. WholeTonesLive.com. One of many happy emailers, and we have had so many, but one client said, I started playing Whole Tones throughout my workday. Not only was I more creative and motivated, the work I was doing seemed much easier, and I was much clearer. We had Michael Terrell on our show, and he did explain how this music was inspired by the music frequencies of King David. And what a great show that was. Support this show and go to WholeTonesLive.com to get a free sample of this soothing, relaxing, revitalizing musical tones. Go to the URL, WholeTonesLive.com, for your free sample, and then just have at it. You won't be sorry. Got a picture, by the way, of Greg Jackson, his CD by the radio, his radio. He sent some time ago and saying he loves it. And I just want to say thanks, Greg, for that. So go to the website, download a free sample at WholeTonesLive.com. Support this broadcast. That's WholeTonesLive.com.
And again, tonight, our guest, Stan Deyo, we're going to bring him on in just a sec. Before we do, I just want to ask everybody out there, for those of you who have been listeners of the show, you know that Stan has come on every Tuesday. For years now, he's been our guest every Tuesday evening, and we just ask that you keep him and Holly in your prayers as Stan's been battling with some pains he's been having. It's been a reoccurring issue, and we ask all the prayer warriors out there to keep him and Holly in your prayers and prayers of healing for Stan.
Indeed, and you know what, folks, Stan Deyo does not have to do any of this. He comes on for us, and he makes a big sacrifice. When I say he doesn't have to do it, I mean, he doesn't need the hassle of the weekly broadcast, but he does because he cares about all of us, and his knowledge is phenomenal, and he's got a commitment to the larger, well, to the larger agenda, and he's doing the work of God. I mean, he's really, he's a great guy, and we're just so honored to have him. Joe, high school, getting you out of bed in the morning, listening to Coast AM with Stan Dale on.
He used to drag me out of bed 4:30 in the morning, 5 in the morning to listen to Coast.
Never thought that
Sometimes
I'd ever
cook me eggs Benedict, but
yes, I got good at that, but never thought we'd ever have the honor of actually speaking with Stan Dale face to face. But here we are.
Stan, it's great to have you back on the show.
I'm blushing, guys. Stop that.
Well, it's all true, buddy.
Okay, good evening. I've been listening to Steve and to Gary with you guys in the first 2 hours. Well, I'll tell you what, it's pretty spooky, that scenario they paint in that movie he's making.
Yeah. You know, it's something that you've talked about that we've been looking at. Joe and I went to, I think we told you this.
1 second after.
Yeah.
It was in Buffalo, hosted by the writers of the book 1 second after, the EMP disaster.
Right. There were a whole bunch of government officials there when we were there, and they were like, I don't even know how to describe it. They were
dumbfounded?
Verklempt. Is that a word? I mean, just their mouths were hanging open saying, oh my goodness, this could be bad. This will be bad. But anyway, if $2 billion is all it's going to take to fix it, what? Really? I mean, can't we fix it? You think?
No. I agree with Gary. I don't think we can, with Gary on this, I don't think we can fix it at this late date, but we need to prepare for it. And you're right. We've talked about this many times on the shows about the need for people to prepare, and Gary brought that up. Get your food, medicine, your weapons, whatever you need. One thing that I had to go do a bit of research just before the show, and I missed part of what he was saying, but I did hear him start to discuss, countries to go to, like, Australia and various other places, New Zealand. And I just wanted to put our 2 cents in worth about that, because Holly and I have been and lived overseas in Australia. And, you don't want, as an American, to go offshore to avoid what's happening here. You need to form community, be ready to, well, as he pointed out, go into the wilderness as the woman is chased, or taken into the wilderness by the wings of the Messiah. You need to be able to trust friends and family. If you go overseas, I guarantee you, when America is in strife, you will be in strife there, because you're no longer protected by America, and they consider most Americans to be rich Yanks or spies from the CIA or something, and you will be at a great disadvantage, if not dead, in friendly countries.
Yeah, and we're neither rich nor spies.
And you'll be blamed. You'll be blamed for everything going wrong. We've already seen it over there at dinner discussions with, a banker and various other people there in Australia. And they just do not understand the American culture. But, for what some Americans have done in other countries, what some Americans have caused harm overseas, all Americans are tarred and feathered with overseas. And you just will be unprotected and an orphan in some foreign country, even if you speak the same language. So we looked at that, and having been over there, we advise people, don't go overseas, stay here, form communities, form escape plans, form whatever you need to stay here and defend yourself and your friends and family. So it's just, Steve Quayle and I have talked about this many times on his show too. You need to get stuff that you will need: food, water, medicine, guns, communication, just, all kinds of things that you will need when society fails us. And there are gangs roaming in your neighborhood. And one of the biggest things is community. Make friends with your neighbors. And, not just casual friends, dinners, and do things together, because you need to have friends around you. You just cannot be an island. And I think what his movie is showing, or will show when it's released, is, a frightening thing, but very realistic to what we think will happen when the EMP hits us. I don't know whether he showed this in the movie, but as soon as our infrastructure is down, our power grid and communication, you can bet your bottom dollar Russia and China will hop on us like a duck on a June bug.
Oh, I believe that to be true. Regardless of what, I believe that to be true. And I just want to take this opportunity to tell people, if you haven't got Dare to Prepare yet, I mean, that is the ultimate preparation handbook, manual, encyclopedia by Holly Deo, Dare to Prepare. Folks, please get it now while you still can before it's too late.
One of the most popular, if not the most popular, preparedness books, and it's been around for a long time.
Yeah, and this isn't about to sell books. This is about to be prepared. And I think, we consult that book often. So anyway, I just want to make sure that people do have that, and take the opportunity now. Go to standeo.com and order Dare to Prepare, because we really need that.
And also on that site, guys, there's a heap of free prep information up in the very left-hand corner there of the page. You will see little orange boxes, and there's preparation, free prep info. You go to that sub-website, and there are links in there to suppliers of all kinds of stuff. There's free Excel program there that you can download to calculate how much of what kind of food and medicine you need for how many people for how many weeks. And I wrote that one. There's a nuclear biological, like NBC prep info, how to survive, in a near nuclear hit, and the fallout, where it goes, and how you can survive in your home if you make a little preparation now. So there's a lot of important things here that you can just go up there and download the heck out of. You better do it before we don't have internet. Anyway, that's the site. And as you said, there's a show images page there where you can click to see. It's down by that little blue microphone. You can see some of the things we might be addressing here today shortly. Go on.
I was just going to ask you something, Stan. I know that we had some things that we were going to talk about, but I just kind of want to get your take, your gut feeling. I mean, you're a guy that is paying attention to a lot of things, and regardless of your level of knowledge about the intricacies of what happened with the death of Anthony Scalia, what's your gut telling you about this? I mean, if anything, do you have any comments or concerns, or from your analysis?
Well, knowing how Obama is just such a forget the law type guy, overriding the law like a dictator almost, and knowing that he's only got whatever it is, 17 months left in office, or is that right? No, not that long.
No,
is it?
Less than that.
Yeah.
Less than a year.
Yeah. Actually,
maybe a year, whatever. And knowing that he wants to, if he does turn the reins over to some other president, which again is doubtful in my mind that we'll even have a free election, but if he does go that way, and he's going to take another position, say with the United Nations or something, as Secretary General, by stacking the Supreme Court to the left or liberal, with the appointment of a very left-wing Supreme Court judge, then he can direct things here in the United States through the Supreme Court, even though he's over in the UN building in New York. He can still do it. So yes, I'm thinking it's a happy circumstance for him that Scalia died right here when he's got the time to, where Obama has the time to appoint the guy he wants. Other than suspicions, I have no proof. I mean, I've read the reports, that have been circulating on the internet, but it just may be an unhappy circumstance that the good Lord allowed to happen because we've turned away from him here in this country. I don't know.
It's a good, interesting you'd say. I mean, God allowing this to happen to this nation, kind of as a judgment.
And I absolutely can see that as a possibility. What definitely doesn't sit right with me, and I know does not sit right with my dad, was the lack of following of the standard operating procedures of investigation, especially after death, and how this was handled, especially with such a high-ranking government official. You'd think that they would...
And no autopsy.
Right. And embalmed. And we, Texas has that law that you have to, before a body is moved out of state, you have to have, it has to be embalmed. However, really, and even at my low-level capacity, as my capacity as a first responder as well as an investigator, look, I mean, there's really a procedure about unattended deaths. You follow a certain pattern, and when you deviate from that pattern is when you get in trouble. So, this really,
It stinks. I grant you that.
Well,
oh, Lord, we are in trouble. We are in trouble. Before we started the program this evening, Joe, I was talking to you about the Middle East being a Balkan powder keg, and I noticed there was this kind of thoughtful silence over in your part, and I said, do you know what the Balkan powder keg is? And you'd kind of heard of it, you think. When I was in school, which is last century, probably 60 years ago, it was part of our history lessons. And the reason it's important in what we're discussing in the Middle East, what we're seeing in the news today, is it's a repeat of the thing that started World War I. Now, you can go look this up, look up the powder keg of Europe, and you can see what I'm going to tell you. But in the Middle East, you've got Syria sitting in the middle of Greece and Turkey and Iran and Russia coming down from the north and Saudi Arabia, all these different people on the edge of Syria trying to carve a hunk out, including ISIS, which has no state. But if you go back and look at history, in Europe, the Ottoman Empire was still kind of functioning at World War I, and Bulgaria and Serbia were in the center of vying powers trying to carve up Europe and get parts of what they wanted. Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Germany kind of were in a coalition, say, the Green Coalition on the left, and Russia, France, and Great Britain were on the, say, Blue Coalition on the right. Actually, I suppose I should flip them, but anyway, geographically. And the Ottoman Empire kind of semi-allied with Germany and part of Bulgaria. Now, Russia wanted Serbia. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire claimed chunks of Bulgaria, and Russia wanted Serbia, So I'm looking at all these things, and I see a central piece of territory being fought over by alliances that were drifting back and forth. And although I said Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Germany were together, and the Ottoman Empire was kind of on the edge of that, there were things going on behind the scenes like there are now in the Middle East, which made it an absolute nightmare to figure out who was going to flinch or blink first. And, what happened, there was a nut that assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife. And she was a Hohenberg, a German. And so what happened was this lit the spark that blew up Europe into World War I, killing millions of people in the process. Anyway, study a little bit about the powder keg of Europe, and you'll get kind of an idea why I put the maps up on the show images page of the Middle East. Okay. And in fact, if you want to just go to the show images page to the second row, first image, it's a map. And it's a map I just took off of Google showing the Middle East players. So you can see where Greece and Turkey and Iran and Iraq and Syria, Saudi Arabia, you can see where they all are relative to each other, because this is important. Look at Syria. Syria is sitting in the map in the very center. Turkey is above it. Greece is to the left of it. Iran is to the right of it. Iraq is to the right of it. Saudi Arabia is to the south of it. And ISIS is in the middle of it. And the United States is offshore on the left side coming over. But you see Syria, like Bulgaria and Serbia, is in the middle of all these vying countries. And the weird thing about it is that, like, say, Greece and Turkey, they're at odds with each other. They're not happy with each other. And Greece has been making overtures, which you can click on, let's see, the second row, pictures of Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras going over to make a deal with Iran, and he's been over making a deal with Israel. So you've got Greece making deals with Israel and Iran. Then you've got Turkey trying to attack the Kurds and to irritate the heck out of Iran, if not have a war with them. And so Greece and Turkey are at odds. But now Turkey is also down in Israel like Greece is, and it's trying to make a deal to be friendly with Israel to import Israel's gas from the Mediterranean Leviathan field. Saudi Arabia and Russia, two of the other players in this game, have decided that they're going to go together and freeze oil prices. Now, typically they don't get along, but now Saudi Arabia and Russia are doing that, and several of the countries in the region are thinking about seriously giving up the U.S. dollar as the petrodollar and going to other currencies. If that happens, that agreement, the day that happens, we'll have an almost overnight collapse of our share market as the U.S. dollar collapses. So all this stuff in the entire world centers right now on Syria and everybody in that area fighting. Of course, you've got Russia supporting Assad, the president of Syria, and you've got Russia saying they're against ISIS, but they're not doing much. And you got the American government, and I'm not talking about the military, I'm just talking about the government, the dingalings, who aren't really putting boots on the ground over when they needed to, doing kind of token air support here and there. I don't know really who to trust as going to be in the final alliances there. Turkey is threatening to send 35,000 Syrian refugees across the little bay there over to Greece, to Athens. And of course, Cyprus and Greece says, "Oh, no, don't do that." And it's got Europe all in a tither about it. This is just a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. Throw a spark in the middle of it, and it will erupt into a nuclear confrontation somehow. And we're there. We're there by the minute as Saudi Arabia and other allies that it's gotten, Egypt and various others, to come in and form a 350,000-man army to invade ISIS in Syria. Wow. I just...
I mean, to me, Stan, it's obvious that... I mean, going back to the Arab Spring, which was not spontaneous in my view. Well, not just in my view, but the documentation will prove or shows that there's discussions for the Arab Spring. But going back, even back then,
2011.
Yeah, 2011, and then Benghazi, of course. But it just seems to me like right now we're at war with Russia, aren't we? I mean, there's really, whether by proxy or soon, toe to toe.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. You're underlining the problem we've got, trying to figure out who the good guys and the bad guys are, if there are any.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was trying to connect the dots, man, and I'll tell you something. I had to use duct tape to wrap my head because you've got like 5 different corners and 5 different alliances, and it's just ridiculous.
Some of them, somebody's going to have to blink in some of those alliances. They've made alliances, but the alliances can be broken, at the stroke of a pen or blink of an eye. I mean, I told you Saudi Arabia and Russia are going to, freeze price. They're also going to freeze oil output, which is because they reckon we've got a glut of oil. So if they're not putting oil out, it may turn around and make oil prices go up. I'm not sure, but Russia and Saudi Arabia getting together. Now, what's our deal with Saudi Arabia, United States? We're at war with, or we're at Cold War with Russia, but now we couldn't afford to be at a Cold War with Saudi Arabia. But yet, that's kind of how this Russian-Saudi alliance, which is forming now then over oil, is forcing the situation. Oil. Can I tell you, oil seems to be one of the major factors in this whole thing, energy.
And correct me if I'm wrong, too, when we talk about oil, a lot of people kind of want to simplify oil and the cost of oil, the price per barrel, but a lot of the oil, or again, correct me if I'm not stating this properly or if I'm off base, but aren't we talking about the cost of, the lift costs and the differences between getting it from Saudi Arabia or fields under their control versus, we'll say, North Dakota? I don't know, as an example. You're talking about different lift costs. And
what do you call it? What are you saying, lift costs?
Lift costs.
Yeah, the cost to get the oil out of the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right.
Or is that not a factor, or is that a factor?
Oh, yeah, of course it's a factor, but it's a very complex equation, as you might guess. Cost of getting the oil out, cost of processing, cost of shipping, cost of pipelining, defensive pipelining if you're doing that, defensive shipping. I wrote the Prime Minister over there in Israel and to his department of like the USGS equivalent, NTM, saying, look, you need to look for oil in the Golan, sorry, not the Golan Heights, in the the Megiddo Plain. It just kind of touches the hill of Megiddo. It's just north of Nazareth, the territory of Nazareth there. But Zion Oil has actually been given permission to start drilling on the southern tip of that. Now, in that area, I pointed out to them. But they need to have oil there in that area strategically, their own oil, because they can only supply about, oil for themselves out of their own wells. In Israel, they can only supply about 40 days worth of oil, and they're out, and that's their total reserves. So gas, yes, but oil, no. That oil, that Afik oil, which Cheney and some others have put money into up in the Golan Heights, is part of Syria. It's in a contested, demilitarized zone that Israel occupies there in southern tip of Syria. And, anybody with a brain would say, well, you can't depend on that huge oil supply you've just dug there or drilled there to help Israel in a time of war, because you can guarantee with all those nuts running around in Syria with guns, bombs, troops, and everything, it only takes a 1.5 hour, if that much, deviation from whatever they're fighting to go down and blow up the oil well there. It's just been drilled in, the Golan Heights. It's not a place to put your strategic resource for fuel and energy. So anyway, I see signs of Israel doing that on shore. There are little kind of hills, and they're not big mountains, but there are hills surrounding that Megiddo Plain, so that they could mount some air defense for fields there, and they could bury some or do them underground so that nobody knows where they are and that kind of stuff. Well, satellites could probably pick most of them, but anyway, it would be easier to defend there in the Megiddo on their own dirt than it would be across the Jordan, across the Sea of Galilee, up in the Golan Heights, or out in the Mediterranean. I mean, torpedo submarines, marine surface vessels could absolutely wipe out your gas and oil wells in the Mediterranean, and Israel doesn't have that big of a navy. So you can see the oil, the underscore problem here with the oil is huge. Years ago, a physicist, or a physics major, sorry, I guess he was a physicist too, who was also a rabbi, became a good friend of mine, and he spent time in Israel, and he said to me, look, we know we have a deep oil supply underneath Israel, but the Arabs have already told us in the surrounding countries, if you ever tap into that and start marketing it, we will consider that a declaration of war, because your wells would be down, deeper than ours, and you would be sucking oil out of our wells. And of course, the response back, which was correct, was, yeah, but our well being down to, our reservoir being down to bottom, lower than you guys, is under great pressure. And that's why when you go to get oil, it tries to blow out your pipelines. It comes up under pressure. So you are, in essence, you're draining our pressurized oil field. So the argument goes back and forth. But that oil pool is there. In fact, I've learned from my dad, who was a petroleum geologist, how to analyze a lot of these things. And there are, as I've said on your program a few months back, there are two underground formations that are like valleys, like reservoirs, kind of longish but deep. And one of those, in fact, both of them do connect back up to the Afik oil deposit underground. And there's a fault line where the oil that was in Afik was trapped, and the rest of it went down into Israel. I'm just almost positive of it. And even the Bible supports that with the type of rock that Israel would find over the oil. And it's a flinty stone, and that kind of particular stone has a definite character. And when you scan over the terrain, and I found the two locations there at the what would it be? About east and south of Haifa, and on the edge of the Megiddo Plain. That might be the very reason that they have the Battle of Megiddo, Armageddon, in that area over oil. Who knows?
Very interesting. And I know we've talked about this before, but it's always good to keep this in the forefront, because motive means opportunity, especially when we're talking with in terms of crime scenes and war. in biblical conflict. Wow. All right. Man.
Yeah, I know. I expect to get up any morning now, then turn on the tube and see war in the Middle East, and it won't be just there. When that happens, because of what Russia will have to do to support its Arab allies by treaty there, Russia will have to neutralize the United States. And whether Russia actually does the EMP or does the nuke attack, or whether North Korea does it from orbit, doesn't matter. As soon as it escalates over there, you can be holding on to your backside, because it's going to be a rough ride over here immediately. You're not going to look at a big delay at all. Which gets back to the thing. You should be hunkering down, getting what you need. You won't be able to go to the store or travel freely if they impose martial law in a, kind of nuclear war scenario or an invasion scenario. It's coming.
Exactly. Yeah, it is, and I think sooner, like you said, I mean, we don't know when, but I would say sooner than later. And people might say, well, you've been saying that for a long time. And my reply would be, well, it's even more true now, isn't it? I mean, it's. Well,
you saw that Walmart shut several hundred of its stores around the place, the planet. And
269, yeah.
How many?
269 stores.
Right. Okay. Well, we shop there because it's right. The supercenter is right close to us. And Holly goes in there and talks with the staff and things like that. And she was in this morning and looking around for various things that she normally buys, and was noticing holes in the shelf. No product. And she was talking to some of the staff, and I said, I don't know, why that happened, but yeah, right. When you close 269 stores and certain things start disappearing off your stock list, you're reducing inventory. You're in trouble. And that's not the only American company that's in trouble. So when this is on your doorstep, that's another pressure for a complete civil disorder breakdown over economy, over food. And we could be seeing people fighting over food very shortly, just like it was before a hurricane, except it's going to be bigger.
Yeah, and Stan, one of the things about Walmart, I've been doing a lot of research on RFID and its various uses. Walmart installed a inventory system which tagged every piece of merchandise that they brought in with RFID tags. So they knew when, X amount of coffee makers, we'll say, were to be sold on a certain day, that they had to restock those coffee makers because of the RFID tags they had on them. So they knew exactly the number they had on the shelves versus how many were sold that day, knowing how much more to order to put back on the shelves. So there should be no reason that Walmart would be or should have empty shelves unless there was some kind of accident or delay in a certain shipment. But what you're describing sounds much out of the ordinary from what I understand how they operate.
Okay, well, and this is a super center, so they're big stores, and we've been watching it. It's something that should be of concern to a lot of us.
We our resident Baltic Dry Index expert Larry M. from Santa Clarita, California. We've been talking about the Baltic Dry Index, but
it was up 6 points to 301 today.
Okay, but Stan, is this? I guess help me out here. It's my understanding this is a composite of indices, but does this affect things like televisions and electronics, or is it just mainly for commodities like foodstuffs and grain and such, or is it a combination of both? And really, does it matter? I guess I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, does it matter is a good question. I do think that Baltic Dry Index does take into heavy consideration, like weighted heavily in favor of how many seatainers, how many ships are doing commerce, how many dollars worth of trade is going on, and it has been an indicator that's been quite accurate for recessions, shall we say, but this is going to be a lot worse than that. So it has its place, but I think the major player is going to be the eruption of war in the Middle East. What I'm concerned about with that is Israel is connected right on this, the Galilee there to the southern tip of Syria, and you might also look at instead of the modern ISIS focused on Syria, it'd be focused on Syria and Israel, because the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, they say, but it's anti-Israel sentiment is huge in the world and growing by day. So look at all those countries that are gathering together ostensibly to go after ISIS or after Syria or Iran, or the Kurds, and wait a minute, they're gathering all these troops and munitions right over the top of Israel. And, if the alliances were suddenly to go the other way, well, you'd see those 20,000 tanks, those 2,450 warplanes, and 400 or 500 military helicopters and 350,000 soldiers that Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan and Bahrain and Oman and Qatar, they've all been putting those into the area to fight over in Syria, and it's just a fall down the hill, like an hour and a half maximum, to get down to the Afek oils and Golan Heights and go right into northern Israel. So we have to watch that. Now, Israel's watching this, and I am certain, especially after, Obama let some of the information out about the nuclear arsenal that they determined that Israel had back in the 50s and 60s, that Israel has gone far beyond that and has developed tactical nuclear devices. And I think because they are so small, people-wise and land-wise, and so besieged on all sides, that there will come a moment here shortly where they will unleash the dogs of war, which are nuclear, on those that are trying to invade and, take them down and kill them. That would include Iran. That would include Syria, if Assad gets, control of his country again, or if not, ISIS and Assad, possibly Turkey. I doubt they'd hit Turkey, but you see what I'm saying? The Israeli factor in this is another wild card. Like you had Bulgaria and Serbia in the Balkan powder keg. Well, if Serbia was like Syria and Bulgaria is like Israel, they're all in the middle of it. It's just an incredibly bad situation.
Yeah, I don't think very many people in the United States really understand or have a clue about this, what's taking place in the Middle East, and especially not about the massive escalation.
We've never been closer to a world war than we are now since, the beginnings of World War I or II, just as Stan had said.
That's right. Yeah.
Well,
man.
People just really cannot afford to ignore this. I know you and I both know, or all three of us know, that it's a mind bender to try to figure out who's allied with who and who's up and who's going where in the Middle East. But that's no excuse for not trying to understand, not trying to figure out what's happening, because a lot of people sit down with their morning coffee and turn on Fox News or CBS or whatever, CNN, and, okay, what's today's news? And in Iran, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, come on, get to the good stuff, local stuff. They think it's all over there, and those that think, well, yeah, it is over there, and it might affect us, but it's just too hard. I'm going to drink my coffee and go to work. And that's the problem. They're going to get caught short, when everything happens. I mean, people don't realize that famine, shortage of food on the shelves, is only 3 days away if all trucking stops, and trains and stuff like that. I mean, 3 days of food on the shelves in the stores. Oh, well. It's
amazing to even think about. And I want to reaffirm that, or just make mention of this again if you didn't hear Stan and ladies and gentlemen, Saudi Arabia, their jets had, the Pentagon is reporting that the Saudi Arabian F-16 warplanes took part in a bombing raid on ISIS over the weekend, of course, but...
And Russia continues its bombing campaign of ISIS in Syria, and subsequently they hit a hospital, a maternity ward, and a school, and they've been...
And Doctors Without Borders were in there, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yep. That's the report anyway. Yeah, it's the Kurds. They're creating a Kurdish state that includes northern Iraq, the entire Syrian, Turkish, Iraq border, I guess one can say. And Turkey is not happy about that. You've got in addition to the proxy wars and the us versus them. You've got the tribal, aspect of this too.
And that's what governments use, as by arming and funding and supporting those local tribal peoples to fight against each other to make pathways for what their agenda is and what they want to bring in.
Well, in that image, I've got the middle image there on the second row of the Middle East on Google Earth. If you look at that and look at Iraq's border, you'll see up the northeastern border is up near Lake Urmia. You can see that in blue. That whole corner up there is where the Kurdish occupy various portions of it. It's not totally Kurdish, but they have tribal areas within that. And that's where they want to Israel's been trying to get the Kurds to tie into a pipeline in Iraq, down the southern part or middle part of it, and go through the Syrian desert, but it's not part of Syria, over into Jordan and then across into Israel. So it could have an oil pipeline coming from the Kurds, because right now 75% of all the oil Israel gets in is Kurdish oil, and they have been sending it up through the Kurds have up through their northern border to Turkey, over through a pipeline to Turkey, and then I guess it goes from there onto ships or something down to Israel. But the oil situation is, again, the zipper, the spark. I would hate to be the Prime Minister of Israel at the moment. Poor man.
Yeah, that's...
Hey, I found an interesting but not warfare type thing when I was looking at the Golan Heights and the Afek oil and stuff like that. I found something that is biblical but really kind of cool. If you go to the third row of my site there, the show images page on the right-hand side, you'll see and read where Jesus spoke to and fed the 5,000. And if you click that map, you will see kind of a little red pointer with a black dot pointing down to a place called Tabgha, which is right next to Capernaum. Remember that from the Bible. Now, to the right of that, straight across, and just what's called the Kanaf, you'll see that there, straight across the Sea of Galilee to the right, is where the Afek oil thing is in the Golan Heights. Now, I just found it interesting that directly across from where that oil is there in Golan Heights is where Jesus spoke to the 5,000 and fed them. And if you go back to the show images page, third row in the middle, you'll see an enlargement of the place where they say you could feed 5,000 to 7,000 people. You could see them there in the mountainside and in the little cove. And that's pretty much, I've been in that area there. You can speak in that area, and your voice is somehow carried up the hill acoustically. It's a really good thing. And, you can, I guess everyone can hear all the way up to the side of the mountain there, and you can see exactly that Jesus was speaking his parables and his piece there.
Like an amphitheater.
Yeah, if you look at it, it is an amphitheater, natural amphitheater, and it's called by the locals the Cove of the Sower, or the Cove of the Parables. And, I tell you, the natural acoustics are just mind-blowing. You can see how a guy, Jesus, could stand right down there at the seashore and speak up to there, and they would all hear it. They'd get quiet, but they'd hear it. And, of course, being right there next to the Sea of Galilee with his fishermen who were disciples, and they got some fish in baskets and loaves of bread, and that's where the miracle of the blessing of the loaves and the bread fed 5,000 people. And that is a peaceful, wonderful thing right across the Sea of Galilee from Golan Heights, where it's going to be, the gateway to come and invade Israel. I just thought it was interesting. I'd forgotten about it after years of not being there in Israel, and ran across it when I was looking at all these maps, and thought I'd share that with you folks. Look and see where it's true. That's from the Bible. That's where Jesus stood and spoke to so many people.
Well, that's awesome, Stan, and thank you so much for posting this picture. Actually, my wife just ordered a brand new printer specifically for printing pictures, high-quality pictures, and I'm going to see if I can't make this the first picture that we print out with that, so I can hang that up on my wall.
Link onto the site. Link onto if you go to the printed comment down underneath, it says see and read. Click to there, and you'll go to a Christian Guy's website, And, he says, it's not for commercial purposes, but you guys, he has a copyright kind of thing that lets you just print that stuff up for your own thing. It's called a photo permission. And you might email him and get a better resolution than the one that we see online, because, those are okay, but, for what you want to do with that printer, and go to his page and look at it. I mean, it's such an incredible thing to see all this research he's done on it, and the pictures he's taken from the air, and the map on the ground showing, how many feet and how many people could sit there and who did the research. And anyway, that's all.
So interesting.
You feel like touching on Pope Francis' little book of wisdom, the essential teachings. Anything?
Well, yeah. What have we got here? About 9 minutes or so. I'll get to that in a minute, because we'll run out of time on that one for sure. But okay. I have up the top of the Show Me page a ball of little squigglies of red and green things, and if you click on that, it will take you to the Guardian page, where they talk about mini brains could revolutionize drug research and reduce animal use. Okay, they are growing these balls from of brain cells that are all linked together and firing, messages back and forth, functioning as a little mini brain in a ball shape. Now, this ball of brain cells that they're growing in these dishes each one is about the size of the head of a ballpoint pen. Now that's tiny, but what you see them doing here for testing various drugs and things like that, that process can also be used to grow little brains that you put onto silicon chips and you integrate into a super, almost human computer. Because the human mind works so much faster in logic and various other things than our fastest computers. If you were to make a computer that was living on a silicon chip, and could be linked together with other balls like this, Lord only knows what kind of a thinking, living organism you would get. But in the time of the Antichrist, this might be, something they use against us.
Ever since I've heard that a computer chip, brain cells grow naturally when placed on a computer chip, that just startled and shook me to the core, understanding what that means.
Yeah, I know.
And I see that they're continuing.
Yep, they're getting very bold about what's going on, and behind the scenes, it's going to be a lot more than this. Now, on to the Pope Francis, the simple wisdom there. We noticed in the last week he's been down in Mexico, trying to pull all the Protestants into the faith down there, and bringing joy and love and happiness to the Mexicans, and trying to get the religions together down there. This Pope has been, in a short period of time, globe-hopping, globe-trotting to form that one world religion that he talked about in that 90-second video that he had, where he tried to get, he showed the Muslims and the Jews and the Hindus and the Buddhists all coming together. He is definitely making a one-world religion. If you go to that, click on the printing underneath the Book of Wisdom, not the Book of Wisdom, you just get the front cover, but if you click on that printing that says See More in the Vatican and Prophecy, and go over to that page, the first thing I've got up there is a picture that I created of the Pope, his hand up in the air, saying everyone is welcome, which is what he's saying, right? But I put 3 flying saucers up there with it. And why? Because the Vatican Observatory and the Vatican itself have been saying, well, if we have aliens come here, they're entitled to be saved too. And so, no matter what they look like, if the aliens or the fallen ones with Satan come and posing as messengers of light, he'll say, okay, we welcome them. And he will recognize Satan and his minions, who will be supporting the leader of the world at that time, whether it be the Pope or some other person that does. The Vatican model through the Club of Rome will be global. And I'll tell you, watch for the Vatican making any announcements about this alien business. That's why I put that picture in there, to make a graphic image that'll stick in your mind. Watch for the connection between the Vatican and the Pope with the flying saucer or alien involvement. Oh, wow. Did you hear that?
Yeah, we heard that.
And we have no phones connected here, so I don't know how that happened.
Oh, it might have been Holly upstairs. She's on this line here. Anyway, back in Pope Gregory XIII's time, he included a red dragon in his like ornaments inside the Vatican there up on the wall, and on a coin that he had minted in 1582. Why the dragon is there, you'll see in this picture on that Vatican page I've got there, you'll see a serpent on the outside of the coin biting his tail, and he's around the ram's head or the sheep's head or something in the middle. And so what I see is the serpent encircling the peaceful sheep, let's say. I thought it was a strange thing for him to put up there with the red dragon and everything being part of it and encircling the church or the sheep. And also
we've seen a lot of this of late, especially in modern pop culture. The Ouroboros, the that symbol of the image snake biting its tail, the cyclical.
From the entertainment industry to the actual Nephilim Mounds conference out in Ohio we went to, and we got a book on all the different mounds out in the Midwest. That the one we visited actually had a trench dug right out of the earth, and it looked like from the aerial shots of a snake swallowing its tail.
Very much, yeah. So,
Yeah, well, that's another thing we can keep looking for in what's happening out there. Another point in prophecy, I'm still developing some of this, I haven't put up on the website yet, but is about, everybody's saying, well, the Vatican sits upon the city of Seven Hills. And in essence, if you click at the map I've got there, the Vatican is actually outside the political purple line the red line that shows the Seven Hills of Rome. So the Vatican is over across the river from there. So technically you might say, well, in the prophecy, the city of Seven Hills, 7 kings sit on 7 hills, that may or may not apply to Rome. Athens has 7 hills. Jerusalem has 7 hills. Jerusalem has, all the major religious sites there for, Christianity, various descriptions, and Judaism and Baha'i and all that kind of stuff. They have their world headquarters type churches there on top of that hill, or those hills that form Jerusalem. Greece with Athens, you've got Cyprus really trying to come to the forefront and make deals with Israel and Iran. Maybe he is the bad boy that's going to be over the revived Roman Empire, 5 to the west, 5 to the east, 5 regions that are in that Club of Rome map I've got right above those images of Rome, or the 7 hills of Rome. So the game's in play, and what we're doing here is putting the pieces out so that you don't say it's got to be that city, it's got to be that guy, but they're going to be rolling around in people's minds that are trying to understand this, and that'll probably be mainly the watchmen. But put these pieces together and watch the news to see for leanings going toward Cyprus or toward Erdogan or toward the Pope, and toward Rome or toward Jerusalem, where there's going to be a new temple built, and Turkey wants to build a temple down there, and has been making overtures to Israel about that in exchange also for getting gas from Israel. It's such an incredible interwoven fabric. It's amazing.
Yeah, and prophecy continues to be fulfilled and unraveling before our eyes. And, the prophecy of the 7 hills is one that's been debated on for, forever, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've been alive at least, and been in paying attention to this. And it goes back and forth, whether they're talking about Rome or another area. But there are a few areas, as you just pointed out, other than Rome, that have and meet that description. And I wonder, I'm looking at the image that you have up on your website about those 7 hills in Jerusalem or in Israel, and I wonder if how many of those were dedicated altars and ritual sites of idolatry back in ancient Israel.
Or before that, in the time of the Assyrians and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are at least 50 cities I'm looking at here that claim to have been built on 7 hills, including Rome, of course, but Albany, New York, Athens, Texas. Some of them, most of them, you can rule them out as ridiculous. But there's one in Amman, Jordan. There's one in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and that one is kind of a loose thing because if you look at it, Mecca is in the middle of several mountains around it, but not on top of it. You know, it's not like a city built on that. But using wisdom, you can look at these various things. But you know, Spain's got them, Hungary's got them, Ukraine's got them. But look at the ones that actually apply to the formation of the global government and the running of it in the Middle East or, you know, as far east, far west as Italy and stuff like that. But
absolutely,
yeah, there's a lot of them there. Look up list of cities claimed to be built on 7 hills in Wikipedia, and you'll find it interesting. But again, it's a number of puzzle pieces to put into the mix about who's doing what and what's fulfilling prophecy and what's not.
Stan, we've reached the end of the hour. You filled that hour with tremendous content and insight, and we thank you so much. And again, we ask all our prayer warriors out there and people of prayer to keep Steve and Holly in your prayer.
Stan and Holly. Stan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stan.
Oh, Steve too.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you.
God bless you. Night, night now.
Till next week.
Remember to settle for battle, folks.
The Global Star Radio Network.
Until tomorrow. Stay safe. God bless.
Don't miss it.
Have a good night, everyone.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?